This is an extract from the Leader Coronavirus Daily podcast by the Evening Standard and hosted by me, David Marsland. To hear the whole thing, search for it on your podcast provider. Football's gone, Wimbledon's been cancelled, not even the Olympic Games could survive the spread of coronavirus, but one sport is still standing: darts. For those missing their live fix of competitive action, almost all of the game's biggest stars will be taking part in the PDC Home competition, being broadcast from their own homes. The exceptions being Michael van Gerwen, who's looking after his new baby, and Gary Anderson, whose broadband's not up to scratch, according to the organisers. The Evening Standard's editorial column is looking forward to the battle and wants more.
Live sport is back, sort of. Dart stars are playing from home, online. Credit to them for trying. Next, will we see Andy Murray hitting a ball against a wall, or Ben Stokes alone against a bowling machine? Sport in isolation is getting creative.
Joining me over Skype is Talk Sports darts commentator Ian Danter. And Ian, how can a sport like darts, with its dramatic walk-ons, its rock music and audiences, adapt to being played in players' houses?
Well, I don't think it's a problem at all. Mainly because when you think about all the televised tournaments that we watch, whether it's the World Championships, whether it's Premier League, whether it's World Match Play, Grand Prix, whatever, for every one of those major tournaments, there's a whole surfeit of tournaments that take place in places like Wigan and Milton Keynes and Barnsley, which are known as floor tournaments for those that aren't familiar. And these are the ranking tournaments where players build up points, and these are played on the floor with no audience. So the players themselves are used to playing with literally no atmosphere around them other than a scorer calling what they're scoring. So for the players, this won't be too much of a departure, other than if any of them have a slight problem with setting up Zoom or Skype or whatever. Obviously, it's different from our perspective as an audience, watching it without the noise that gets generated at Alexandra Palace or the Winter Gardens in Blackpool. But I think, we're all realising just how much we have to see past that in so many regards in order to see what we want to see, which is some competitive action.
Are you, as a sports fan, missing that live action fix? And can darts fill that for you?
We have to appreciate that, these are uncharted times and all bets are off. And we have to wait until such times as it is safe for everybody to re-engage with live sport as an audience. So there's the way it ought to be and there's the way it is. And I think darts is as well equipped as any sport to deal with the way it is and ride out the obvious lack of audience and what that might do to an atmosphere. But yeah, as I say, it deals with the way it is and is dealing with the way it is, because this tournament starting tonight on the PDC's own channel, it's the one that the obviously the governing body have got behind, but there have been other little tournaments that have sprung up before that. My good friend Paul Nicholson, the asset, has been taking part in a little floor tournament with some of the other players like Mark Webster. So, the seed has already been sown for what's starting tonight.
I wonder if other sports bodies are going to be looking at this, seeing if it's successful, and then maybe trying something themselves.
Darts is a very unique sport in the sense that you can, play in your living room or your garage or whatever, and there's no barriers to playing it in the home. And there's very few sports that can actually do that and give you that opportunity. I mean, snooker could probably do it because all the professionals have got snooker tables at home, but organise it so that they play separate frames. Who's first to clear the table. It's not that straightforward. Darts, it's so much more straightforward because, you're playing one after the other. It's still needed, though, the governing body to go, right, how do we get round this? So, it's still innovative, but the chance was there for darts to take it.
Some F1 drivers took part in an esports competition. You might remember Leighton Orient set up a FIFA match, which ended up getting involved with some of the biggest clubs in Europe. Could we see more of that?
Yeah, esports was always going to benefit one way or the other from a lockdown. That's fine. The esports is, it's got its own route to take. But in terms of live sport, where you can actually see on a camera what's going on in real life with, real human beings launching darts at a board rather than imaginary darts on an app like I might have on my phone. That's a different level altogether. It might be a generational thing, but it's easier for some people to tie in with and buy into it because they can see Peter Wright, for example, tonight, throwing darts at a board.
So with this competition, if someone's just a casual fan of the sport, or if they've never seen darts before at all, what sort of things should people be looking out for?
Well, what will be interesting is whether the tension that is created in either match play or set play in darts between two players can translate to when they're in two separate locations, and whether a player who's, say, on double four, the other player's back on 187 or something, whether that player who throws from 187 and gets to a double places the same sort of pressure onto the other guy who's on double four to still hit that, whether it's a floor event that I mentioned at the start of this interview where there are no people around, but it's still, one-on-one, and you can see the other player and there's a psychological aspect to it. Does that psychological aspect transfer to when one player's in, Surrey and another player's in, I don't know, Wales or Scotland or something? That's going to be interesting to see how that works. But yeah, look, as I said, there's a lot of personalities in the game of darts. There's a lot of, people that do attract fan bases. That's wonderful to see. You go to the world finals and the amount of paraphernalia and merchandise that people lap up, that, everyone's buying Peter Wright Mohawk like wigs they can stick on, and they lap it up. They absolutely love it. So I think there's going to be a lot of people that are going to be very, very happy to see this happening. And whilst there might be a few technical problems along the way, I think a lot of sports will look at what darts is doing here with this and think, well, is there any way that we can translate our sport into a way that makes it work in a domestic environment? Very tough. Good on them for putting this together.
Search for the Leader Coronavirus Daily on any podcast provider to hear more from the podcast.